Nance and Brown are two of the 6 Lakers under contract. Only 2 of the players on the team are over the age of 23. Jordan Clarkson, of course, is technically not part of the 6 because he's a restricted free agent. But here's Mitch Kupchak on the philosophy behind completing the roster this offseason.
You do have to have a balanced roster. I think the game has changed, more today than it was 20 years ago in terms of the way the game is played. So I'm not sure having the traditional 7'2" center is as important as it once was. But you still need big players. And in today's game, those big players, the 3, 4, or 5, they may be interchangeable. But the one thing we do know with Luke is that he does intend on playing an up-tempo game very similar to the way they play in Golden State. Now, we don't have the players that they have in Golden State, and it's naive of us to think that because we have Luke, that's the team we're going to have next year. But we do know that he does want to play up-tempo, fast-paced basketball. He does believe in threes. He does believe in layups.
All right, so that small ball philosophy, which we've seen all over the NBA in recent years, do you think that the Lakers will have a smaller and faster lineup next season?
That's the plan. But I think it really depends on free agency because I certainly know that one of the biggest problems they have is a rim protector, rebounding. So they're going to go after Whiteside. So if they get Whiteside, he's a big. Next you think Festus Ezeli. Al Horford fits in there at 6'10". Now, those guys can run, and they're not your typical back-to-the-basket, type big men. But the one thing, and Mitch Kupchak said, Luke believes in layups and threes. Well, this Laker roster right now, as it stands, doesn't have three-point shooters. And there's a big difference between the Splash Brothers and the guys they have. So Mitch was absolutely right, and I don't know if it was in that conversation or one I had heard somewhere else, but Mitch has got to put the pieces together, Brian, for him to be able to play like that because you can have the ingredients,
sure,
to make a meal. But you
got to have that chef to put it all together. I think the important thing to remember, too, is the Lakers don't have to try to fix everything in one off season. They got really lucky. They're going to keep the draft pick, and that's going to improve them. But they can look at the free agent market and the trade market and think about what are some small things we can do? How can we fill one hole or 2 holes? And there are a lot of guys out there. You heard Dave talk about Hassan Whiteside, a guy like Bismack Biyombo, Nick Batum. There are a lot of players out there that can add defensive structure without being that classic back-to-the-basket guy. And they can fill a couple holes this summer. They'd be good for it.
I think, though, Laker fans would say that everything needs to be addressed immediately.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt him because I know what you're saying, and I understand the process. But right now, there's so many holes in the dam that you're trying to plug everything because there are some needs.
So where are the biggest needs? Where are the biggest holes in the dam?
Well, based on Luke Walton coming in, the biggest hole would be three-point shooting, which I just talked about. But also, they don't have a perimeter defender. We've been talking about that 6'6", 6'7" lockdown defender, and that really has been the problem. I mean, don't get me wrong, the quick shots, the floor not being balanced on offense, that all plays into it. But sooner or later, you get into the half court. So they don't have guys that can build that wall I talk about, be able to protect the lane. And then once they do get beat, they're in rotations and they don't have rim protectors. And that's where I don't care how big he is. I mean, when I say Ingram right now is my lead, Ingram could be a great weak side shot blocker just based on his 7'3" wingspan, his 6'9" length. But shooters, perimeter defenders, and they need somebody to patrol the paint.
Yeah, and he blocked a shot and a half a game at Duke, Ingram did. So he's certainly got that instinct. I like guys that can add, again, that defensive integrity to go along with what Dave's saying. Like, you want a guy like, go back to Batum, there are players out there who can help make everybody else better. It's going to be hard for them to find perimeter defenders because they need Russell and presumably Clarkson coming back to become those guys. But they can fill holes in other places around the roster and make it so there's more predictability in the defense by having guys who know what they're doing.
You think Batum is one of those guys who would make everyone around him better?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What other realistic options are there in free agency?
Well, before I go to realistic, because that would be my realistic choice, I like Kevin Durant. I mean, that's the one where...
I also like Kevin Durant.
Right, and so does Oklahoma City and 29 other teams. But you've got to make that phone call. I mean, that's, if you have unlimited calling, and I think the Lakers do on their calling plan, you've got to call. But I don't think Kevin Durant is coming to L.A., and that's where Nicholas Batum comes in. And remember, he really struggled in Portland, and he had those nagging injuries, but he gets to Charlotte and he's one of the top 2 scorers. His assists went up, and he's a two-way player. He can pass it, he can shoot it, he can dribble it. KD is, to me, the guy that solves all your problems very quickly. But take a poor man's Kevin Durant, and that's not disrespecting Batum. If you can get Batum, Whiteside, Batum, Horford, now I think, and the other day I said, we're 3 to 4 years away from getting into the playoffs. You get those guys I just mentioned, you're a year to a 2 away.
And Horford, those are 2 guys that aren't going to get in the way of the development of your younger players. And you don't want to do that to Russell, and you don't want to do that to Randall. You want guys who will be complementary and fit in, even as good as they are. A player like Al Horford is a star, but he's not going to dominate the ball in the way that perhaps somebody like DeMar DeRozan is another name that I know gets thrown around a lot. Guys like that will help make the other young players better.
Right.